Hi friends, I'm Kate. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I am an artist. I do projects, all kinds of projects. So you guys asked me to show you how to do acid staining on Hypertufa. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So let's get started. And if you like this video, my very first tutorial video, give it a like and hit subscribe because I'm going to try to make a whole bunch more about all kinds of different things from painting and gardening and making hypertufa and random projects that I do around my Brooklyn apartment and on my roof deck. Let's go. Okay, let's start with what we need. You're going to need some glass jars or containers for the solutions you're going to make. You'll need brushes, rubber gloves, white vinegar, ferrous sulfate, copper sulfate, manganese sulfate. These are just the ones that I use. You can use oxides. I prefer the sulfates to the oxides, like massively prefer them because I think they work better and they make cooler colors. But you can use oxides if you want to. I think they act a little bit less like a chemical reaction in my experience and more like you're just painting. You'll need a kettle or some way to heat up your water, a container of water for rinsing your brushes if you need to, some kind of towels, paper towels, regular towels, whatever you want to use, and a plastic bag. Okay, let's mix up a solution. I'm going to show you how to do one. This is manganese sulfate, which I actually haven't used before. So you're going to take your powder and pour some in the container. Now, it would probably be better for you if I had exact measurements, but I don't. I just experiment with it and get different results every time because I don't mind that. You could probably figure this out in a more specific way. Okay, I'm adding vinegar, and then you're going to heat up a kettle, and I heat mine to 140 degrees. It doesn't happen this fast. I sped it up for you. And then I add warm water to the mixture. How much? I don't know. I just guesstimate. And you'll notice as I'm going through this video today that I added more of the sulfate to this mix because I felt like it wasn't strong enough. And I've never used this one before, so just watching. But you're going to have to mix and you want to stir it really, really, really well. It's boring to watch, but I want you to see that it takes a little while. Basically, you want to keep mixing it until it really makes a solution, meaning that all of the powder is fully combined with the water and it no longer looks like it has a powdery substance in it. It just looks like a liquid that's kind of translucent. When I finished this, I realized that it was not enough sulfate. It just looked a little bit too translucent to me, and I wanted it to be stronger, so I added more. And then later, as I painted on, you'll see that I felt like it wasn't really doing anything, so I added more again to the solution. So you just keep stirring until it's very well incorporated into a solution. Okay, then speeding it way up, I'm just showing you that I added more because I felt like it wasn't strong enough. And later I added even more. Okay, the fun part. So now you're going to start painting your hypertufa with your acid solutions. I do want to pause for 1 second. So I should say that you are working with creating chemical reactions here. So be careful, do your research, make sure you're not doing anything unsafe. I am not a chemist, so I'm not claiming anything about this being safe or unsafe. So please use your own judgment and be cautious and do this in a very well ventilated room, or even better, please do it outside. Okay, so now you can start painting now that you're being very cautious and careful and maybe wearing a mask if you feel like that's a good safety precaution. So I am painting on the copper sulfate, which, if we're being honest, is my favorite because it creates my favorite colors. Copper sulfate will give you greens and blues, basically. And when you mix it with other sulfates, you get other results. know that it's a chemical reaction, and all of this is interacting with everything that's in the air, as well as like it's even interacting with the metal on my brushes. And every time I do this, I get slightly different results. This is the ferrous sulfate, which tends to produce things that look like rust. It makes browns and oranges. It makes really intense oranges. So for the little one, I want to try the manganese sulfate, which I haven't used before. It should produce a rich dark brown, like a chocolatey brown, sort of an iron effect. As I worked with this, you can see that that solution looks pretty translucent. So partway through this process of the first time using the manganese sulfate, I did add more powder to my solution because I felt like it wasn't really doing anything. It's probably a good idea to do some hypertufa vessels where you're just, or whatever it is that you're acid staining, where you're just using one sulfate on a piece so that you can see what it does. And I've done that on pieces before, and you still get different results every time. I've painted pieces with ferrous sulfate and had them come out very bright orange, and I've painted others where they came out orange and black. So you really don't know what you're going to get. And that's part of what's kind of fun about the process. You'll notice that I don't really paint it on so much as I drip it on. I like to do this in sort of like a watercolor process where I'm dripping and trying to create blooms. And as I go, you might also notice, see, I'm intentionally dripping on the side. And I like to add some solution and let it sit and just kind of see what it does. And as you look at the piece on the bottom right here, you can sort of start to see how the orange is starting to come up and the green is starting to show up where the copper sulfate is. Here, I'm going back with more manganese, thinking maybe if I add more, it will be more brown, and it keeps kind of doing nothing. So you'll see that I later add more solution to it. So this gives you the general idea. I paint it on, drip it on, and then I give it a minute and see what it does. And I might drip other sulfates into the solution. Sometimes I use the oxides. I didn't in this tutorial because I just don't like them as much, but I'm going to show you some pieces at the end and tell you what in my memory each one consisted of and how I got the colors that I got. But again, stressing that this is a like malleable process. I can do the same process 2 times in a row and get very different results depending on the day. And everything in the air affects it. Probably everything in the air where you live affects it. All of this is interacting with the oxygen in the air. That's part of the chemical reaction. So you're going to get different results every time. And I think that's kind of a cool part. So as I go, I flip them onto their sides. And in my experience, having some pooling of the fluid really impacts how cool the colors come out when you're finished. You can certainly just paint it on and you'll get more solid colors if you do it that way. And I have done that before. I'll probably show you some footage of some of those in the end of the video, but I prefer dripping and mixing and pooling the colors so that you get more spontaneous color effects. And you'll see that when you play with it, like if I do ferrous sulfate and then I mix copper sulfate into that, it really does look different when it's finished than if I start with copper sulfate and mix ferrous sulfate into that. So you want to just play with this, play with your colors, play with the different solutions and see what you like and what you get. I like all the drips and I like it to look kind of like it's been, sitting outside and been stained by weather and who knows what dripped on it. Hopefully nothing disgusting. But that's how I like to do it. You can play with it and apply them however you want. Another thing, I don't know if you can really see because of the way I framed this, but something else you may notice is that sometimes I rinse my brush. And the idea here is I don't want chemical reactions happening in my main jars. So I don't want to mix copper sulfate and ferrous sulfate and manganese sulfate together in the jars because that's going to change what I can do in the future with those solutions. I want to try to keep the solutions in the jars pure. So if I do anything other than drip two together, I will rinse the brush with water and wipe it off before I put it back in its original jar, just to try to maintain some level of purity. And I'm doing this on a mat that is designed for doing potting of plants. It works really well for protecting my table. I like it a lot. I use it for a lot of different projects. But as I go, it starts to create puddles. And sometimes, as you can see here, I just roll the vessel in the puddle because that's good enough. It's going to get solution all over it. And I just continue to play with it and drip more onto it until I think, meh, this is good. I like it. It's gonna work out. So I'm going to just let you guys watch what I do for a minute. Sometimes I let it sit a long time. If I kind of like what it's doing, I just let it sit and kind of, basically, I let it sit and complete the chemical reaction before turning it, because as I turn it, it's going to cause the fluid to drip and it's going to change what it looks like. Sometimes I paint them upside down and I let it drip all down from bottom to top, and I let that sit until it's not dry but dry-ish, and then I flip it back upright and drip from the top to the bottom, and I let that sit so that you get kind of an ombre effect. I didn't do that in this particular video, but I do that sometimes. So you get the idea. Keep painting, dripping, try to keep your brushes relatively clean so that you're not contaminating your original solutions, and you just keep going at it until you're done. I also like to always have multiple things that I'm painting at once because it can be a slow process. Sometimes I like to let it sit for a while. I probably worked a little faster for this video because I knew that you guys would be watching it. So you get the idea, and sometimes I wipe up the solution just because it gets too messy. And you can see on the brushes that the solutions do interact with the metal on the brushes. So it's important to wash them when you're finished. Let's speed this up for you to watch the rest. Okay, now we're going to put it on a mat and take it outside because that is where I have my plastic bag. And I pretty much always have this plastic bag here for Hypertufa. Oh, it's really hard to record with one hand and do something with the other. So enjoy this view of my topsoil bag and the mess from carrying it. You do want to put it on something that you can carry it on so that it doesn't drip on everything, because it will stain everything that it comes in contact with. Your plastic bag, which I had to empty because it was too full of water. Get it into your plastic bag. Yeah, see, you can see there it's like completely full of water, and so I decided I needed to empty that before I actually just left them. We'll close it up. Actually, I don't fully close it. I leave it so that some air is getting into it, and then just let it sit. You can check on it as often as you like, or let it. And this is a few hours later. You can kind of see how the chemical reaction has made the colors more intense. You can see the oranges of the ferrous sulfate and the browns of the manganese sulfate. And you can see some greens back there. That's the copper sulfate.
And that sums up the process. I'm going to show you some, you can see some Hypertufa back there that I have plants in. I'm going to show you some of my Hypertufa projects that I've done and acid stained in the past. And acid staining is not the only process I use to color Hypertufa. I do other things, which I'll probably do some tutorials on. So another reason that you should subscribe to my new channel. What else did I want to say? Oh, I'm going to show you some now that I've finished and kind of talk about what materials I used and which chemicals create which colors, so you have a better idea of what you're going to get going into it instead of having to just experiment to figure it out. So here we go.
This one is copper sulfate and ferrous sulfate. You can see the orange and green. And this one is copper sulfate with some black iron oxide. And here we have ferrous sulfate with copper sulfate, and then this one on the right is just completely ferrous sulfate. You can see that it still created some black, even though you would think it would be orange. This is all copper sulfate, and it looks kind of blue, just giving you a little view of all of them. Sometimes copper sulfate looks blue, sometimes it looks green. Another one that's ferrous and copper. And this is also ferrous and copper, but I applied the copper first on this one, so it's much more blue and less orange. So that is it. Have fun.